Welcome, everyone. I'm Mark Michelson with CX Forums. This is our show called Connext Live. It's every Wednesday, and we feature guests to talk about specific topics. And if you would like to be a guest sometime, let me know. And please, by all means, if you're here, bring friends next time. If you're watching a recording, the main thing you're going to be missing out on is our networking, which is going to happen after this discussion. So our featured host today is Greg Kihlström. He's with CareerGig and has a lot to say about what employees do and what they need. And also Josh Olson. So Greg will be interviewing Josh Olson from VMware. And at that point, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and let you guys take over. Welcome. Thanks.
Welcome. Great, thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen here, just so I have a couple slides to accompany what we're going to talk about today. So what we want to talk about, as Mark was saying, is with remote work obviously affecting a large portion of the workforce. There's been a lot of change over the last year, but really it's been part of some ongoing trends that were already in place. And so what we want to talk about today is creating a great employee experience while having this flexibility and this flexible workforce. And you can't have great customer experience if you're focused on that or marketing. You can't have that without a great employee experience behind the scenes. And so our goal today is really just to talk through several aspects of this. And I'd like to welcome Josh Olson. He and I have collaborated a number of times. He's an accomplished speaker and employee experience expert, and really with VMware's focus on distributed workforce and all of that, really, I think we're gonna have a great discussion today. So Josh, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Greg, and happy to be here. Great to have a talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So so let's get started. So as I mentioned briefly, you can't have great customer experience without employee experience. The way that we often look at this is by calling this umbrella that really sits over everything brand experience. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, Josh. How do you define great employee experience? It's just such a key part of that.
I think when you're thinking about the experience, it's such a general term, right? It's so hard to define, but just when you actually dig into it, you kind of walk away with what's your exposure to the brand and what do you think about it, right? And what's it make you feel, right? Which is kind of nebulous. And I know it's really hard for people to quantify and put value on it and all that stuff. But as you kind of think about it, when I think about employee experience in context of brand experience and customer experience, if I'm constantly tripping you every time I ask you to do something, you're an employee, I'm asking you to do something for the customers because that's what we're all here. If you think about a company, the whole purpose of the company is we're all a bunch of individuals coming together for a joint goal, right? So as we do that, we then start to think about, okay, customer experience, we're trying to deliver a brilliant experience, really attached to the brand value and the employee experience piece. If I'm constantly tripping you up, it's almost easier to define it in the reverse. In other words, what's a bad experience? If I'm tripping you up every day and you cannot deliver brilliant experience to the customers, that's a great way to define it. Like, okay, that's where I need to focus. I need to focus on these five elements that change that customer experience.
Yeah, and because looking at brand experience is literally every touch point that anyone has with anything. I mean, to what you just said, imagine a frustrated employee, even if they believe in the mission and the values of the company, if they can't do their job or they're frustrated doing their job, I mean, that's going to come out in some external way. Again, even if a company is really solely focused on the bottom line, it makes sense to invest in that employee experience.
Yeah, exactly. Great point there, Greg. Because when you can't attach to that mission, if you will, you believe in it. Maybe that's why you're at the company, but then all of a sudden you can't actually deliver on it. You're like, okay, fine. It's just a bunch of hot air. Forget it. I'm going to go find somewhere else that actually believes in the mission and enables me to achieve it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, dive a little deeper and remote work. So, again, remote work was already on the rise, but as we all know, it's it's been taken much further. So can you talk a little bit about this idea of remote work being here to stay, even if there is some kind of new or next normal or something that happens in
Yeah.
in
Yeah, so this one's fascinating to me because we just completed a survey, end of 2019, right before COVID kind of hit the shores of many countries, right? And it was fascinating because at that time we found out roughly 97% of information workers, so people that could work from anywhere, right? They all wanted to be able to at least one or two times a week, depending on whatever it happens to be. They want the flexibility to be able to do it. Of that, there's a high upper than, it was higher than, I forgot the actual stat, but it was upper, I think it's like 67% or upper 60s, almost 70% of those said, I'm willing to quit a job that doesn't offer me that flexibility, which blew my mind. And then COVID hits and companies that said, we have no policy for you to be able to work from home. You cannot do it. It is against the rules. You can't do it. We'll never be effective. We can't be collaborative when we're all distributed and remote. It doesn't work.
Right.
And then these stats came out the summer, in June, July is when we did this survey of employees and others. And I'll just call out a couple of the stats, but like 67% found that the productivity stayed the same or increased. At the same time, the collaboration stayed the same or increased. And my favorite on this whole slide is actually 73% agreed that the innovation is coming from outside of HQ. So let's think about a traditional company structure, and you got the R&D department. Oh, Eureka, I've created something new. Hey, marketing, can you go take this and just broadcast this to everybody? Make sure we can, effectively, this is like, 1950s era kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But like that challenge is fascinating to me because all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. We've over time realized, okay, there's better ways to market. We can do, all sorts of different, more targeted marketing campaigns, and think about things like Google AdWords and everything else, right? But it changed how we think about marketing. No one's really changed about how we do work until more recently, and specifically how we innovate. And now all of a sudden we're saying, actually, what if I had 100% of the employee population that had this ability to communicate back to corporate and do something meaningful and go, you know what? I think we need to innovate here. Here's where we need to innovate. Quick example is what happens at Target when people are because of COVID, right? There's a lot more of this. People were already doing it before that, but now there's a lot more people just driving up, say, put the groceries in the back of the truck and I'm out, right? And then they also have this whole thing where Shipt is a company they bought that does delivery, right, of packages. Think of what they just did. What they did is they created basically a virtual warehousing structure, an omni-channel way of delivering things from any location. But they also had to change the delivery personnel, if you will, because that Shipt business unit of Target, right? Think of them as a delivery where they're going to deliver it to your house within sometimes 30 minutes or whatever, right? Yeah. Depending on the SLAs. That becomes fascinating because how do you achieve it? Because all of a sudden now you've got innovative ideas coming from the person that's driving their car going, hey, I want this app to automatically know when I'm actually in the Target parking lot so you can meet me out at my car because I don't want to sit there forever, right? Yeah. That's actually the innovation they did. But again, it's because they started to think differently, and all of a sudden these little innovative ideas are coming from all throughout the organization. Imagine if every company could tap into this innovation that's buried in the depths of the brains of every one of the employees, right?
Yeah. And then, I think that's a great segue into the next idea, which is, there's all these ideas, there's things good and bad happening in the world, but a subject near and dear to my heart is Agile. And, I've got my own podcast called The Agile World, wrote a series of books on applying Agile principles to various aspects of business. But I think this speaks very much to that, which is, we've either got great ideas, we've got, challenges in either within the organization or external forces that we've got to deal with. How do we create an Agile organization that is able to deal with the good and the bad? And so, how does employee experience from your perspective kind of tie into this?
Yeah, that similar to kind of like what you and I have talked about before, but it's like when it came to COVID, this is a fascinating kind of look at this, because on the left here, you're looking at KPMG came out with a study, 2 out of 3 CEOs believe agility is the critical business currency that they need to be able to develop and be agile, just like you've always been saying, right? But at the same time, those that did that were able to actually adapt to COVID. So the McKinsey found that, in a June 2020 survey. And what I'm finding now is every company, whether they believed it before or not, every company now is sitting there going, and actually I want to hesitate. I want to pause for a quick second. I keep saying company, and I've got to stop doing that. I've talked to so many governments and organizations and nonprofits and all across the board that have all realized they want to be agile, because what they realized, they weren't agile. So 2 out of 3 want to do it because a third of them already were. Right. And when you think about getting agile, like some of the stuff that comes from an employee experience perspective is, if I can digitize, if you think about every role now, like even the janitorial services role, I've got to do certain things. Like you got to track my time. You got to, pay me for that. So I got a time management scheduling system. I've also got, other systems of record around like supplies and other things that I'm responsible for. And I got requests and those kind of things. All of that is digital now. And because all of that's digital, it changes what you're able to do. So as an organization, if I can digitize almost every role, I can track what's going on and I can make it better. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, if I can make it better and digitally change it and become digitally agile, if you will, right? It's almost, to me, digital and agile is becoming like interlinked throughout everything you do. And because of that, now all of a sudden you can think of new ways of delivering that employee experience and saying, just-in-time pulse surveys right at the moment that you just did a task. How did that work for you? And at that moment, that's when the employee is thinking about it going, well, it was okay, but if we just move this box over here, this whole shipping department would run a little bit better instead of having these boxes in the way or whatever, little things like that. That's where you're driving these efficiencies at large logistic companies globally. It's all exponential, but it's at the micro level. We've got to get the micro insight to the macro organization.
Yeah, and that's where I think what you're doing at VMware is extremely interesting, because I think I've done a fair amount of work in the employee experience space, and what I will say is, even in customer experience, there's a lot of behavioral psychology. There's a lot of great work being done and research being done, but to our earlier points, there's also a lot of very practical, pragmatic, and technical things that make such huge. I mean, you gave one small example there already, but could you talk a little bit about what are some of the ways that you're changing the employee experience that maybe people aren't thinking about, because they're thinking about employee engagement surveys and they're thinking about other types of things, but
yeah. So some of the things that we're doing is, one, we have this ability to secure every digital workspace, whether that's a device like a phone or a tablet or PC or something like that, or the applications, all of that, and think of it as like a digital wrapper, and make sure it's secure and private. So the individual wants to make sure that my privacy is adhered to. At the same time, the corporation or organization, as I should say, right, needs to make sure that it's secure and that the information is not going to nefarious actors and all that stuff, right? So because now you have this thing that's both secure and private that I can deliver every experience to digitally, now I can do really interesting things. Like, for example, simple little thing, but we found out working with a bunch of companies, some of the challenges they have is for new hires is just getting you a badge. I've got to have a different system of record, a different person then request that. Then I got to get it to you somehow. I got to make sure there's a chain of custody, by the way, which is fascinating, depending on what the badge allows you to get access to. So I start to go, okay, what's that like and how to make it more secure? We actually created a digital badge that actually we feel can be actually more secure, because the digital badge works on all your devices, specifically like your phone. I literally hold up my phone and I can digital badge into the building or into perhaps like a secured closet or data center. I can actually do step-up authentication where I can actually do facial recognition or other, multi-factor authentication, not to get technical, but it allows you these layers of security that I can then do more secure things with, all with eliminating the thing that the employees frankly forget at home or in their car anyhow, right? My badge, I had it yet last week, or it fell off or whatever, right? You don't even have that problem anymore, right? Yeah. And then you can take that digital badge and do interesting things with it. Like, well, because it's digital, I can interact with vending machines, cafeterias, I can interact with all sorts of things, right?
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
also, because the digital workspace is with you, some of the things that were interesting challenges was this whole concept of returning back to the office. How do you do this in a way that's meaningful? Well, first off, I have to announce to everybody, I got to have this digital billboard, if you will, that's what I call it, is a digital billboard in your pocket where have this, if you think about intranets, you got to be VPN'd in and all this other stuff. That means people are typically sitting at a PC and you're not sitting in the PC all day long. So
Right.
instead, I can actually give you a virtual, a secured container that I talked about. I can deliver that billboard to you right on your phone. It's secure. You see it right away. You don't have to do these additional layers because the VPN's baked in, all that stuff. What that allows you to do then is from an internal communications perspective, I can push information to you. It'll give you an alert, a notification. It calls attention to it on the app. You then see it and go, okay, here's the COVID protocols. Here's what's changed. We've also embedded into that things like workflows where now I can pop up an information to you and go, hey, by the way, I need you to validate your health status. So there's this health attestation piece before I unlock the digital badge, which unlocks the door for you to get into the building. Little things like that. Again, it's because we've made it digital, we can make it agile.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, I mean, so much there. And again, I think it's often overlooked because it's not, what might traditionally be considered like EX or, or stuff like that, but makes such a huge difference.
I think of it as remove the dull, mundane, boring tasks, and you get rid of all the frustration of the employee. Somebody said, employee experience, it seems like a nice to have. You want it, but we're in COVID. People are lucky to have jobs. It's a nice to have. Why am I worried about this? And I said, actually, it's the reverse. It's when so from an HR perspective, now all of a sudden, instead of getting 10 resumes per job, I'm getting hundreds per job, which how do I filter that if I don't have some sort of digital kind of front end to this to understand it and help with this whole process? But it's all about the workflows too on the back end, because if you think about it, it's not just the HR person, it's the HR recruiting team, it's the comms teams, it's everybody that's looking out for you, Greg. You're the employee. You're this treasured asset. If I treat you like you're the customer, you're going to treat our customers brilliantly.
Yeah.
Right. That's the bottom line here. And if I don't do it, you get frustrated. You either leave or you treat the customers, less less well, right? And I'm trying to figure out how do I enable it in such a way that it's just a brilliant experience constantly.
Yeah. Well, one last point before we break here, another aspect of this, working flexibly and all that is there's a lot of members of the workforce that aren't even full-time employees. And so the freelance workforce is growing. And so, this slide just shows how, from the late 70s to, a few years from now, I mean, this is a large percentage in the US alone, not even just counting worldwide. So, this certainly brings in what I kind of term the hybrid workforce of contractors, full-time employees. And, so how should we look at employee experience when there's this mix of all kinds of people? Some are there every day, or even virtually there every day, and some are part of the extended workforce.
Greg, I think first off, this is hugely telling of what's happening, in the marketplace and the need for, solutions around this space around, flexible work. There's so many more people that I talk to where they want the ability to be like a freelancer or a gig worker, that kind of thing. And at the same time, a lot of the companies just aren't prepared for it, right? They have, because of COVID, I will say this is changing rapidly, like 10 years of development in 10 days kind of thing. Like it's crazy. But what's happening is people are starting to think differently about, if it takes me a couple of years ago, I did some work with a large company, and they had to set up one of our consultants, and it took well over 2 weeks to get the consultant the system to be able to do some of the consulting on, and then another 2 weeks to make sure that the appropriate access was granted to the consultant. 4 weeks for them to really become truly effective in that role. And the engagement was supposed to be for a month. It took them a month to get set up for a 1 month engagement. It's like, you can't function in a world like that. It gets back to that agility question, right? How are you going to be an agile organization if you can't get these things done. So you've got to be able to have these digital elements already secured, already in a private state, so I can give it at a moment's notice on whatever device you happen to have. Bring your own device. Fantastic. Here you go. Here's this brilliant experience. And I've got to be able to say, I've got this digital billboard, one-to-many communications platform with notifications and the right kind of pulse surveys and all of that baked into it. And with all of your applications with what we call single sign-on access. So you're not fumbling around trying to get in and out of these different applications. It's all sitting there. And if I can do that for the employees, imagine what this does now for freelancers and contractors that I might want to augment my staff with. Immediately, I can then have them, and I can start to change how I actually break up that work. Instead of saying, okay, I've got a 2-year development time horizon, right? Well, why is it 2 years? When you peel that back, there's a reason for it. Well, because right now I need the staff focused on this first project before I can get to the second side of it, before the third. And then eventually we'll have this product innovation implemented. The problem is we've kind of teased that out. It gets to both, you don't have the number of employees you need, but you're also not going to hire too many because you won't need them 6 months from now, right? So there's this whole kind of need for freelancers, and you're starting to think, okay, well, how do I augment quickly, be agile, plug them in where I need them plugged in, and then pull them out? And that gets into this whole concept around distributed work, first off, because I need to be able to tap into resources wherever they are. I don't need to focus solely in Palo Alto. That's great. There's a lot of folks there, but there's also like resources in Toronto. I want to turn up an employee in Toronto in a moment's notice and say, fantastic, you're hired. You're the best for this role, for this particular segment that we need for this project. I need your help. Go. And immediately when they're done, that's pulled and is removed. And now I'm on to the next piece of it. Building those things is really impactful when you can do things in such an agile way.
Yeah, agreed. So, to just kind of wind up here, how does somebody get started in this? I mean, I think, we've put a few thoughts here and, as bullet points, but Josh, you want to just kind of walk through that?
Yeah, some of the best organizations I've seen. First off, there's several books you can read on employee experience. Jacob Morgan's a notable one as well. Likewise, you have a great book. I recommend people check out if they haven't read yet or not. The other thing is start by assembling a team. So what I mean by that team, I mean a team of cross-functional business unit folks, right? So cross departments, where you start to think about things like, yes, there's an HR component to it because they're rethinking roles to begin with, right? And who does what role, and how do we break up what work has to be done for the organization's goals? But then also thinking of folks like, the facilities teams and the physical security teams. Well, if we're changing how we're using offices, this all changes, right? So what do we do with that? And how do we actually rethink how work gets done? And then I'd also add in things like there's these line of business hiring managers and other folks that you got to have as part of that team. So that way they go, hey man, my job is to work with my team of 20 people. Right. And I got to hire another person. How do I do it? Like, how do I juggle everything? Right. So if you can have this cross-functional team, they can all get together and discuss this and come up with innovative ways to address the problem. And you got to assess that situation and say, hey, this is where we're at. But also when I said, this walk in the shoes of the employee, just sit there. And if you're McDonald's, go be that person sitting in the drive-through window. Yeah. Getting yelled at by a customer who's irate because somebody, maybe you're the second window. The first window takes the order, the second order delivers it, and somebody took the order, but they didn't write it down correctly. It was no ketchup or something on a hamburger. I mean, I know I'm getting granular, but you got to get granular, and you got to go, wait a minute, how did this happen? And what could we do to change that experience? Yeah. And so one of the things that obviously McDonald's does to help with this scenario is actually they have people wearing headsets, the front window, the second window that's going to give you the food. So they're both kind of hearing you order when you drive in, but they can throw a third headset on somebody who's the line cook. Why? Because that's where they put the ketchup on. You follow what I'm saying? Like they got to start, okay, got it. They got an order coming in, and they mentally start thinking the moment you ask for that no ketchup hamburger, the line cook is getting that information. They're not waiting for a ticket to pop up. yes, that is part of it, right? They're watching the tickets and all that other stuff, but at the same time, they can change how they're actually operating by simply just, I'm going to give you an extra headset. But that's an example of walking in their shoes, going, what's it like? And then be human. That's the other one. So many times, so many jobs are defined almost to make humans into robots or respond like robots. We're in an era now where just have a robot be the fry cook.
Right.
McDonald's, right? Nobody wants to do that job anyhow. And it's very robotic. So have a robot do it, right? So think of those things that are human, and mainly in a lot of roles, there's so much boring, mundane work that has to get done. Do this approval. You're a manager. I need you to do 50 approvals today. You're a staffer. I need you to do 50 TPS reports today. Like, get rid of that stuff as much as you can and simplify it. If you still need it, simplify how you do that so you can get these approvals and boring, mundane stuff done as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, I think we're at time here. So
Great job, guys. And the whole walk in the shoes. I mean, that's ethnography at its finest. And really, I'll give you one more tip before we go here, and that is allow them to tell their stories the way they want to tell them. And that could be through video, it could be through text, it could be through pictures, right? But if you actually ask them to sort of day in the life, capture a day in the life, and that's really helpful for journey mapping too. So you can, mobile ethnography is the key there, because they can share that story very easily, however they want to a platform that allows you to analyze it quickly. And you'll be able to highlight what is missing, what's wrong. And that's what you always want to focus on. So anyhow, hey, thanks, guys. You did a great job. For those viewers who are watching the replay, you're going to miss out on the networking portion of this. Every week, we meet and we have a guest, featured guest, to talk about something related to CX. And then we spend a majority of the time in networking, typically 40 minutes in networking, 20 minutes of programming. So next Wednesday, join us for Dennis Wayakabashi. We're going to be talking about some thoughts and strategies and innovation for 2021 and beyond, when we emerge from these cocoons that we're stuck in. But just a big thank you to you. Audrey, let's play the outro, and we're done here.